Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dog Classroom podcast. I'm Anne-Marie.
And I'm Amelia.
And we are going to talk a little bit more about a specific topic for this podcast. The reason we're bringing this one up is I have been doing a lot more consults lately with inter-dog aggression.
Right, so basically two dogs in the same household who are fighting.
Yes.
Not just generally reactive dogs, which we have talked about before.
Right.
But the situation's different.
Right.
When you
So
live
these
together.
dogs are and have actually been living together, and and all of a sudden, there has been an issue.
Right.
So the few consults that I'm going to refer to are ones that the dogs have actually been living together for several years. And according to the owner, out of the blue, have began fighting. So where I want to go with it is I just want to throw a little bit of information in general about dogs coexisting, right? Because we had done another podcast about bringing a dog in. So we did a little bit of multi-dog household. So I think sometimes, and just to go general with this, is I think sometimes what happens is we do the training when the dogs are young.
Yes.
Right? And as they get older, I don't want to say we get lazy, but we get in a routine. These dogs were still getting their walks. They're just, they coexist in the house. And I don't want to necessarily say we get lazy, but some of the training sometimes slips a little bit. We just assume the dogs are fine. What happens is there might be a little growl here, a little growl there. Dogs looking at each other a little bit differently, staring. To be honest, the majority of the times the owners either dismiss this or do not see it.
Yeah, and they miss it a lot. To backtrack a little bit, I guess I am thinking about reasons why this is happening, and as you're talking,
Okay.
I'm thinking
You
of
got a
some.
list? Okay.
So one of the things is if they have been living together, did one of those dogs reach social maturity? So we talked about dog sociability.
Yeah.
So if I have, let's say, I have a 3-year-old dog at home, I bring in a puppy.
Yeah.
They're okay for 2 years.
Yeah.
When the puppy becomes an adult and has their own personality,
Right.
there starts to be a clash.
Right.
So that
and
could be
the
a
owners
reason.
are surprised.
Yes.
Right.
The ones that you're talking about where there's a little growl here and there, has there been resource guarding that we've missed? So a lot of inter-dog, inter-household aggression is because, one dog walks by while the other one's eating, or one has a bone and they try to steal it, or there's resource guarding going on that leads to eventually a clash.
Right. So Amelia threw out the word resource guarding. A lot of what happens is multi-dog households is there's resource guarding of a human.
Yes.
Yes.
Or
humans.
a spot.
A spot. Yeah.
So it's not always like an item, but
Right.
they'll sort of have this buildup of, I did a little growl, and then, you kept coming, and then another little growl one day, and then it becomes a little snap, and then it just, escalates into fighting.
I honestly feel the tricky thing is the owners believe that it'll just resolve itself.
Yes.
And go away. And, the reason why we're doing this is to, first of all, educate, because, if you're looking for help and you happen to, find our podcast, we want to give you some information. But the other information I honestly want you to understand is I wouldn't dismiss it. Right? As just being casual. I think when you address a situation sooner than later, there's less emotions. And I don't think people understand how emotional dogs actually are. They do experience anxiety and stress like we do. And when those situations continue to escalate and we, either choose to ignore them or not address them, that's building, and it's really hard for dogs. You can't turn it off and on.
Well, I think it's just like people. Like if we, I was reading this thing and it said that sometimes we get a dog for our dog, and we try to get our dog because we want them to have a friend, and we have this nice picture in our head of what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And then it says the dogs end up being more like roommates than friends. So if you've ever lived with a bad roommate and, they left their dishes in the sink, and then they left the toilet seat up, and then they didn't take the garbage out of garbage, whatever, things start to stack up and you feel anxious and you feel stressed about that person. And then your day-to-day gets to be more stressful. And then, again, it's hard to come back from that.
It's interesting you should say that. So what I'm picturing right now is when Amelia's talking, I went into the house to do a consult, and there had been some just sort of growling and so forth. It was so interesting because I think being like a second, third, fourth pair of eyes is that whenever this one dog in the house walked around, the other dog had like moon eye, its eyes were huge pupils, and it was cowering.
Yeah.
The owners didn't see that.
And
until
because
I
we know the
pointed it
body
out.
language, right? Which is why I think everybody who has a dog should learn dog body language. But when you have multiple dogs, like if you miss something like that, because you saw it when you came in, because you knew to look for it, and maybe they didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
But like, there's also times where like we go, oh look, it's cute, like they're cuddling. I can use my own dogs as an example of this because Stark is my reactive dog, and Nuggie will, try and sneak in there and like cuddle with him a little bit, and I can see his body language. He's not happy about it, So if we think, oh, like what a cute moment, I wouldn't be surprised if Stark either got up and left or maybe growled or whatever. Doesn't usually happen because of their relationship, but I know to look for that.
Yeah.
Right. Because
and possibly diffuse it.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing is having the body language to pick up on it when you're living in the multi-dog household. It was a really good scenario how you put just, the coexisting. We assume everything's going to be fine. The other interesting thing I'm just going to throw in there, and then I'm sort of going to keep moving forward, is siblings.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I've also had a few of those where people think they get two dogs at the same time and they're going to love each other and grow up together and it's going to be the best thing ever. And then they start being rather particular and going after each other, or not, say, being as tolerant in adolescence. And now you have these two raging teenagers going after one another, and it's a lot. So, we're not trying to be pessimistic here and say, don't do this and don't do this. We're asking you to be aware of the possibility it may happen, and implement different things, different training scenarios when it does happen, or also do different training scenarios so it doesn't build. I can help you a lot more if it's just a growl.
Yeah, then once they've had like a level 3 bite.
Because again, a few of them, hundreds of dollars of damage to each dog. There's emotional and mental baggage. It is a lot harder to mend that relationship than it is a growl.
Yeah. And that's where like we can help give like management solutions. We can sort of, so it's not that, oh no, my dogs fought once and they can never live together. So what are, we can't get into too many specifics, but what are some general things? Like I know, for example, when I have someone ask me about multi-dog households, my first suggestion is feed them separately.
Yeah.
I don't want you to share the one bowl.
Why do they have to feed side by side in the kitchen?
Or from the same bowl or whatever.
From the same bowl. Yeah. So why not eliminate it? Some dogs actually like privacy. Because, some people will say, well, my dog won't eat at night. Well, the dog actually likes when it's calm and private. Or they'll also tell you the dog sucks back the food.
Yeah.
Well, it can be a guarding component, or they're just so worried about not having that food. So don't create stress around food. Okay, there's number one, multi-dog household. I know we say this all the time. I swear almost every podcast we say go to mat and leave it. I'm going to say it again. The thing with leave it is when something hits the floor and all dogs are on have the same training, there's no competition.
Yeah.
There's no, I'm going to get that before you do.
Because they have all learned leave it separately and then together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. The other thing is go to mat. So instead of telling my dog, no, don't do that, I just ask them, go lay over there.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no, and the dog's like, okay, I'll go lay over there. I just diffused a situation. So the other tricky thing is if dogs get confrontational, there's a bit of growling, staring at one another. If I can catch it and redirect it quicker, nothing's going to build. So what I'm doing is diffusing the same situation. Same happens with people.
You don't want to wait until there's a fight and then go, oh no, what should I do? You
Exactly.
want to prevent it if at all possible.
Right. So I'm not giving anybody crap.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is please go lay over there, and it actually diffuses itself.
Yeah.
So in having those little tools, you're able to do that, right? So the other thing is exercise.
Right, together and separately.
Together and separately, because the thing we forget, and Amelia and saying, you know, when we get the second dog, we hope they exercise the first or second dog. Without them, is there still should be a relationship with each owner per dog. And we get it, life is busy. We're not asking you to carve out half an hour for each dog every night. We're asking you maybe 5 minutes every second day just to keep up that bond and the relationship. The way I look at my dogs is, you know, some people, you know, we say mom and dad or, you know, call us parents and so forth. I'm their guardian, right? And the thing is, you know, I do have certain rules and so far in the house so we can cohabitate efficiently, right? And what I say to owners is they buy the dog food, they pay the bills, there has to be a compromise and we need to work together. Because if everybody's going to live there together, there has to be a compromise. You can't have, you know, one dog strutting around telling everybody what to do. The thing is their mentality is they're more like children. So they need to be taught and sometimes managed.
Yeah. Well, if you've ever had teenagers who don't get along in your household, there's going to be some conflict. But I think knowing the early signs, going, okay, I've recognized there's an issue, and then having, I guess, the education to go, it's not going to work itself out. It's not going to get better on its own. I need to do something. Because the other thing that you brought up was their feelings, right? Yeah. So if, let's say, you wait till they're growling at each other, you give them, you know, a little bit of heck, and then they have escalated feelings toward each other.
Yeah.
So you start yelling, whatever, and then they're associating that with the other dog, and we're creating more conflict. So sometimes it makes more sense, even though it seems like a minor issue, to get in there, call certified trainer who has experience with multi-dog aggression, and work on it before it gets to the point where, oops, we have vet bills.
Right, but the other thing is people think, okay, I'm going to train, I do this for the first 2 years, and then the dog will be fine for the next 10. And it's like, okay, yes and no. But the thing is asking for help. Like, you can't just assume. Things change. Owners have health issues. Dogs have health issues. There's the emotional level, there's hormones, like there's a lot of things. So you can't just sit there and say, okay, if I do this one training class, my dog's gonna be fine for the rest of the 10 years. You have to take it day by day, week by week. So I still think mental stimulation is important as well as exercise to help them in the home. First thing I ask owners when they're having issues is that happening? The other thing to remember is maybe one dog, and owners will pick this up sometimes, they just need time apart.
Yes.
Right? Like they're together 24/7, they get on each other's nerves. We can imagine the same thing if we're living, you know, have a spouse or children in the home. That may happen as well. So it's important that they do some things together and not other things. And we as the guardian need to help set the example and help them out to navigate it.
Yeah. And so sometimes when you have a multi-dog household, there is a little bit of management going on at first. And we've talked about management before, but like if one dog is pestering the other, not leaving them alone, maybe they need to have like a gate in between, or one needs to go to the kennel for a rest, or one needs to go outside or whatever, like taking those steps to manage the situation. And then also when you're seeing things like I'll see it sometimes with the litter mates or like if you have a senior dog at home and then you get a young puppy,
Yeah.
is where one dog is sort of seen as the aggressor, but really they're just asking for help. They're asking for space. They're asking for something to stop. And so it just becomes, at that point, like a habit. And we don't want that to form, and then that becomes the relationship. We want to get in there before that happens.
Right, and just because they're dogs doesn't mean that every dogs in general, size, breed, personality, are all going to be able to cohabitate efficiently. Yeah. And the other thing to remember is they're still dogs. So again, they're not children, because when you talk about possible rehoming or whatever, or it doesn't quite fit, there's a different mental awareness. Like, you can't sit there and reason with a dog. Like, they learn differently, and they navigate situations differently. Don't assume that they'll just work it out.
Yeah, and you did mention rehoming. The other thing that I'll say on that is, when people go, okay, my dogs are fighting, I have to get rid of one, I'm going to get rid of the one that did the most damage. Yeah. Unfortunately, by that point, if you have one dog attacking the other, nobody necessarily wants to take in the dog that has a history of inflicting thousands of dollars of damage on another dog. So it becomes really challenging to sort of make that decision. And I think when you have, like we've talked before about making the right choice in getting another dog. Like when you, for example, we talked about like getting Maui when you had Tulip, like knowing she was small,
right?
Knowing that, there's going to be a big rambunctious puppy, like making choices, being aware of those choices, and taking that into consideration too.
Yeah.
So you knew bringing Maui in that, hey, I need to protect my small dog the most, right? Because she might get grumpy. So we want to make sure that we take that into account, and right off the bat, we're setting, a good example and setting those boundaries between the two of them.
Yeah.
And
it's a note to self. And when you approach in there, then there's way more room for success than disappointment.
So one thing that people like to ask is, what should they do when a fight does happen?
Yeah. So,
different in every situation. But.
Yeah, different in every situation. Obviously it's very stressful. They say the 95% of dog fights are vocal.
Yeah, so just noise. No
noise.
Damage.
There is actually no damage. People's first instinct is to grab the collar or get their hands on. Yeah. Not ideal, because mouths are flying.
Yep, and they're just
dogs don't know what's dog, what's human. Okay, so first thing is, don't put your hands in it. A suggestion is bucket of water, air horn, grab a leg or a tail. A lot of people say, well, if the dog's big, trust me, adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah.
You can do a lot with adrenaline, is just pulling the dogs apart. I absolutely do not believe that they will work it out.
No.
The tricky thing with dogs is the more arousal and emotion there is, they can get to a point where we call it actually predatory drift.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite terms, but to the point where there's no thought process involved.
It's fight and flight.
It's fight and flight. Exactly. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And they're in fight mode, which is what you don't want.
Yeah.
So you need to sort of intervene and get in there. But really what I'm trying to do with this podcast, I think for Amelia for bringing it up, but is educate that something needs to be done sooner than later. Because once there's damage, there's more emotion there. And it's honestly, with the owner.
Yeah.
There's more emotion and mental stress, because they no longer trust the dogs. They're nervous about the dogs moving around the house. They're worried that every situation the dogs will happen. And I've seen it. They have, honestly, PTSD. Yeah. But honestly, it probably could have been possibly prevented, that it shouldn't have happened that much, because those are the little cues. We just have to watch and don't assume that they're going to live happy-go-lucky and we all get stuck in a rut. They're walked at the same time, they're fed at the same time, they're given attention at the same time. Dogs do have a buildup of baggage.
Yeah.
Like, and I say to them, there's a point where they'll take it from the other dog, they'll get grappled, they'll get shoved. They reach a point where they've had enough.
Yeah.
And it happens, same with people. They reach a point where they had enough and they start to retaliate, because a lot of clients will say to me, well, the other dog just submits and cowers. And I'm like, just wait.
Yeah, well, and even if that is the case, is that fair for them to live their life that way?
It's absolutely not fair. That other dog is living in constant stress.
So when, if a fight does happen, when people are living in that house with those two dogs, a lot of the time they're scared to have them in the same room together again.
So there's management strategies. There's a lot of gates. Some people choose not to do any training. And honestly, I gear it on the bite index. If there was multiple bites with a lot of damage, the prognosis is very poor. Therefore, it's recommended that the dogs not learn to cohabitate anymore. We start trying to repair the relationship outside of the house on walks and controlled manners. The problem with the house in general is the issue, the doorways and hallways, the protecting of the kitchen, the protecting of the owners. So what you try to do is give them time. We look at alternative therapies. Adaptal diffuser is the first thing I tell people to put in the house if the dogs are starting to have issues.
So what is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Adaptal is, I was actually talking about it this morning. So Adaptal is, it's a dog appeasing pheromone. So it's the smell of a lactating female in a diffuser form. We don't smell it, guys. Everybody's worried that people will pick up on the smell, but it's a calming. So maybe it helped take the edge off the dogs. The other thing sometimes you'll see fighting is one dog is sick.
Yeah.
And so the position in the house is sort of changing, and the other dog will then start to go after that dog. So, which is again adding more stress overall. But I'm just trying to say these things can't be ignored. And I'm actually asking too is that you seek professional help, because this is usually way beyond the skill set of just an owner, right? But make sure you're getting help from somebody that has experience working in this, understands the training, not only behavior. Like training and behaviors are honestly sometimes two different people, if not the same. We are both. But, you can't train this with sits and downs. It's not going to work. You have to understand the emotional component of it. And honestly, I see time ticking down here. I could sit here and discuss this, I think, for 2 or 3 hours, but...
well, I think there's because people go on the internet, right, and they find things on the internet, and if you Googled, my dogs are fighting, there's a million YouTube videos of teach them place, teach them go to mat. And
yes, which is what we do, but that's not the final, that's not only what you do.
We need, the whole picture, and we need to actually work with the individual dogs. It's not something you can get from a YouTube video, because their dynamic is going to be different than whatever other dynamic that you find online. So I think in having the idea to do this podcast, it was never to get super specific and do a case study. It was just general info and what should people do, because we hear it from time to time. I know you do lots of consults with intrahousehold aggression.
Right.
But I'll sometimes hear it from passing, in puppy class, where someone says, my puppy is pummeling my older dog, and now they're getting.
Well, I also think it's the opposite. How many times have we seen puncture wounds on puppies from older dogs?
That's true.
Probably shouldn't have happened. I don't know if the two of them should honestly be left alone together, because by no means do you bring a toddler or a young child and leave it alone with a dog. You have to watch the age difference, and you have to give them time to figure each other out. So the thing we're trying to get is there's training involved. I'm going to summarize real quick here.
Yep.
Okay. Training involved. There's definitely emotions and mental stimulation.
Yes.
We're asking you to be more proactive. Okay. When situations are happening, and be constant proactive. Just remember, as dog gets older, things shift. Just because you trained your dog doesn't mean, they're going to be perfect for the rest of their life. There's a lot of different things happening in the home, in the environment.
In there, there could be medical things coming up. There could be, maturing social changes we talked about when the puppy hits 2 years old, you may see a change in their dynamic and that sort of thing.
And then there's also baggage. So Amelia sent me the term trigger stacking. I'm going to do a little moment is, guess what? We are going to talk about that. That was an awesome one. We didn't get it to it sort of this session, but I'm going to throw a little teaser out there and you guys are going to say, okay, what is that? But we are going to talk about it. The thing is, again, we as people, as dogs, we can take things, one at a time, but when you're throwing 5 different things, it seems to knock us down a little bit. Same thing works for the dogs, where you're building multiple layers. We need you to address the first layer or 2 before we're at 5 or 6, because once the damage is done, it's really difficult to go back to how it was before, and pretty much guarantee it will not go back to how it was before. If the dogs are still able to remain in the household together, and that's a decision made upon the trainer as well as the owner, there's still always going to be a little bit of management and extra watching. There's always going to be that body language, but the idea is education, teaching and teaching. So again, they're animals living in our house, right? They need guidance. They're not going to be perfect. But it's just being aware of those changes every day, not taking necessarily the dogs for granted, but
I think this whole episode was basically to provide that education that we were hoping that people people can have. So we want to help to avoid these issues, but if you are having these issues, knowing that there are things that we can watch for to prevent.
And again, seek help, because this isn't an issue that I agree with Amelia by watching YouTube videos or whatever, or talking to a friend. You know what? There's more involved. And the thing that's scary is, again, if you have kids or other people in the household, they're in the middle of this. So it really does need to be addressed.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.